Hey y'all, I'm Catherine Greenberg. It's great to be back. And today we're going to be talking about a couple things that will probably sound relevant given everything that's going on lately. We are talking about triggers and modifiers. All right, let's go. So we hear a lot of people talk about triggers. You hear it in language, you hear it in conversation, trigger, trigger, trigger. I want to talk about the difference between a trigger and a modifier. Okay, a modifier is anything that makes a noticeable positive or negative difference to your state of mind, right? So let's say you're struggling with depression and you realize you have a family event coming up and your family may not be the safest place to be, and you find that when you go and you engage in that visit, that's sort of a negative modifier because your depression increases when you're there. On the other hand, when you go out and have coffee with a friend who feels really safe and is just someone who fills your soul with joy and love, that's a positive modifier. Does that make sense? Okay, great. I'm going to say something and I don't mean it to be harsh, but here it is. It is not the world's responsibility to tiptoe around you. Your triggers are your responsibility. Okay. A trigger is something that sets a problem in motion. So a modifier changes the way we experience an issue, but a trigger is sort of like that starting pistol at the beginning of a race. You probably would have otherwise not experienced the situation, but there's that trigger and it comes in and it's like, hey, here we go. So if you are someone who deals with anxiety, you may find that a trigger comes up when your person, your partner, they're going away. They're going away on a business trip. Well, you may find that your emotions become unmanageable because all these thoughts come in and it's like, oh my gosh, he's leaving me. He's not going on a business trip. He's going to have an affair. He's going to do this and they're rejecting me and he's leaving me. And all of this stuff that comes up from your emotional history displays itself in the present. That's a trigger. The third thing, which I didn't mention at the beginning, but I want to talk about now, is a critical incident. So where triggers are typically frequent occurrences in our lives, and they vary according to your emotional history, a critical incident is a notable life event that happens either before the onset of your symptoms or it can bring about mental health issues for the first time. It can also reawaken some that have been dormant for a while. So this is an event in your life that is large and might feel overwhelming, and it's a specific event known as a critical incident. Okay, moving on. We talked about what a trigger is. Let me catch you up on what a trigger is not. It is okay. It is valid. You are okay. If you feel upset, if you feel anxious, if you feel uncomfortable when you encounter hard content, this is life. You're going to encounter hard content. Remember, you're not going to change what life throws at you. All of your magic, all of your power lies in your ability to change how you respond to that. You can have a strong reaction. It's okay. Obviously, I invented strong reactions. The idea is to learn how to regulate your emotions. It's part of your emotional development. But what happens when you're a kiddo, your identity is developed based on how your grown-ups reacted to you. So when you don't know what you're going to get from a caregiver, it's really, really hard to develop in a healthy way. And so this allows you to learn some emotion regulation so you don't feel like you're constantly in a state of crisis and you're all over the place and you're managing all the time. Here's the exception. Trauma triggers. Trauma triggers are in a class by themselves. What happens when you experience a trauma trigger, you might feel like you have a loss of a sense of time. You might hear it known as losing time, a loss of space, a loss of your sense of self. Your emotions are either amplified or feel like they're really muffled. They may feel like they're completely unrelated to a situation. Trauma triggers are like a trapdoor in your brain. It just opens and remember that trauma creates a change that you did not choose. What happens when you heal is you create the change that you do choose. So when you become triggered, what happens is your brain, which does not want to lose its job and it will always want to do something, it would rather worry than do nothing, but it takes all that input from the trigger and it interprets it based on your past experiences, all that history. And what happens is all of those emotions that you feel, those sensations in your body, they can begin to feel overwhelming because it feels like they're all happening at once because your brain is taking all of that past history and that's what you're responding to, not what's actually happening in the present. Okay, how do I deal with this? I'm so glad you asked. Here's how. Name the facts. Facing facts is empowering. As humans, we tend to be really adept at creating stories in our mind. And then we begin to believe the stories. Let's go back to the facts. We must learn to separate our emotions from the facts of the situation. Who, what, when, where, why. These are your 5 W's. Those are the facts. And what happens is as you begin to name the facts of the situation, just the facts, ma'am, it takes away some of that charged emotional interpretation that you're feeling. This isn't gonna happen overnight, dude. I did not get this muscle overnight. You are building a new muscle. You are learning a new language, and you may have to return to those facts over and over and over, really getting into the depth of what you're actually experiencing in the moment regarding all your senses. Remember how much you carry in your body. Notice where you feel it in your body. Your mind, body, and spirit all have to connect for this to work. When you list the facts, what's gonna happen is you're gonna separate and then organize what's happening in the moment. And that's all that exists. This moment, this breath. That's it. That's all there is. Right here, right now. You come here. Learn to notice the difference between someone disrespecting you and you feeling disrespected. Check out whether you're listening with emotional ears. Emotional ears will typically hear from a place of offense. And it's not about what the person said, it's what you are triggered by. So unless you know your triggers, you're gonna see everything as an attack. Let's talk a little bit about lying. So I often tell my clients to look at what you lie about. It provides us so much information and it's almost always protective. What happens when we lie, it's typically coming from a place of having been over-controlled as a child. And when you're over-controlled as a child, it tends to set you up to lie as an adult. So when someone is over-controlled, that triggers that desire to feel freedom, right? It makes sense. So if there is too much control with not a lot of respect for your other needs, it triggers lying so you can have what's sort of a freedom feeling, right? You feel free when you lie. You can create whatever you want. But what happens is when you're a survivor of trauma, you begin to associate that freedom feeling with lying, and a pattern gets established. So look at the lying, figure out what the information is, and figure out whether there's an actual threat or a perceived threat. Your brain can't usually tell the difference between similar and same. And the chances of there being an actual threat is very rare. It's usually something we perceive as a threat because that's coming from our history. And the other thing I want to touch on is choosing. Okay, I've had so many clients come to me and say, oh, I don't know, dude, I just did it. I didn't think about it. I'm like, no, that's absolutely not true. We talk about our behavior as though we have no control over it. Oh, I just couldn't help myself. I didn't even think about it. I just did it. You may feel as though you have no control over your behavior, but it's really not the case. The key to not acting on those urges and increasing control over your actions is, wait for it, awareness. Awareness. Awareness, awareness, awareness. You had to get uncomfortable because you won't move otherwise. Some of the most amazing things that have happened in this world, in my life, and so many people's lives happened because we were so uncomfortable, we couldn't stand to remain still anymore. And we were tired of feeling complacent. So we moved. We made that choice. It didn't just happen. We had a thought about it, and then we created action to make a difference. When you want something, you end up generating more want. So rather than wanting, choose. Make a change. Choose a change. What do you want? What do you choose? And you can allow others to show you what you don't choose anymore. That person who is a total dick to you, thank you so much for showing me how I don't want to be. Thank you for showing me how to be moral and virtuous. Thank you for allowing me not to be complacent. Sometimes your teachers are going to come from the most unlikely humans. We thank them, we bless them, and we release them. Witness others with compassion rather than judgment. Our instinct is often to judge. Oh my gosh, why were they such a jerk? Why were they this? Okay, I get that, but what happens is when you judge, you put your own will on the situation because you want something to be different from how it actually is. And that prevents you from being in your wise mind and you remain stuck. You can choose to evolve or you can choose to remain. It's totally up to you. You can evolve so hard that people are going to have to get to know you again. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Catherine Greenberg. I'm a certified life coach, and I work with people who are struggling with addiction, who've experienced trauma, women who are survivors of human trafficking, who are experiencing homelessness, who are in residential treatment centers. We're not meant to live this life alone. We're designed to be connected. So if you need support, please, please, please reach out. We are here. This is what we do and why we do it. I know your pain. I've been there, I've lived it, and I'm quite certain that I had to heal so I could go out and help others heal. So let my healing be a part of your survival guide. It would be such a privilege and honor. We've got some incredible stuff coming up. We're going to be talking about forgiveness and guilt and shame and a whole bunch of other stuff that I hope will really help you figure out how to manage this life. And in the meantime, remember, you are loved and leave some space for grace.